Medical disclaimer. This podcast is intended for educational purposes only and does not serve as medical advice. Kate and John are not medical professionals. This podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or prevent any illness. Always consult your physician before making lifestyle changes. Welcome back to the Illuminated Path. This is episode 10. What are we talking about today?
We are continuing our conversation on stress. So if you haven't listened to episode 9 from last week, we really dove into stress and the nervous system. And now there's just so much to talk about. So we wanted to continue that conversation.
Also, I dropped the ball on testing a new focus feature, which left Kate's frame completely out of focus. So, I think we kind of had to get a second shot. How's the week?
The week is good. Last weekend, we took the pups on a nice hike on our last really warm day. It was like 80 degrees and so beautiful.
Yeah.
We also had a really fun time tearing up the floor of our basement that we did because we got water in our basement. So we're working on that.
Always fun.
And we went to our wedding venue. We met with our day of coordinator and just got to see the venue again and walk her around it. And then we grabbed lunch with her. So that was a really nice time.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm enjoying my new workouts.
Good.
I really feel like I'm doing a lot more, and I think for the first time doing a lot of the weights that I always kind of avoided at the gym.
Mhm.
Because I was always like, I'm not going to go do the bench. I'll just grab some dumbbells and really kind of coming into my own in the gym and owning it and knowing these are the key lists that I need to do.
Yeah.
And it feels good. I feel like I'm seeing progress much quicker than I ever have.
Yeah.
Learning a lot more about video. Our hike, I have this app that lets me track golden hour,
Mm,
and it's just really fun.
yeah.
We were on our hike and I was trying to find spots in the forest where there was a clearing and some sun coming through, and I got some good shots of you and the pups. And yeah, that's been really fun. And I'm reading a lot more. I've talked about I really studied the ultra healthy, the ultra wealthy, and reading is one of the biggest habits that they all swear by.
Mhm.
And I've really tried to read a lot more, but I think it's kind of been it always depends on what mood I'm in and what kind of book I want to read. So
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of deep work on my relationship with money, especially as we kind of overhaul all of our brands and everything we're doing.
Yeah.
So let's get started. We talked a little about stress and the nervous system, but can you kind of walk us through the lens, right? So much of our stress comes from how we're perceiving things.
Right.
So can you kind of speak to that and where that all comes from?
Yeah. So if you really think about it, each of us as individual people see the world through our own lens. And that lens is based on our thought programming, our behaviors, and our beliefs. And so most of that is formed at a very young age. It's what we learn when we are young between the ages of 0 and 7. And we did cover this in an earlier episode too. But we're just like little sponges absorbing everything when we're younger. And so that creates the lens that we see the world through. There's ingrained beliefs and core memories that we have. And so it's kind of like you put on a pair of glasses and it's like, that's my individual lens of how I see the world.
Right.
And yours is different. Everybody's is different. And that's why two people can be in the exact same place at the exact same time, experiencing the same thing and have two totally different perceptions of the situation.
Yeah.
Because we're always putting our own meaning behind what's happening. So we apply our own meaning. And that's a really big piece of stress because I can see something as so stressful and someone else is like, no biggie.
Yeah. It's so important to really kind of consider how you're perceiving things.
Yeah.
This whole thing makes me think of, um, I believe his name is Jocko. Let me look it up real quick. Jocko Willink. Jocko Willink. He wrote a book called Discipline Equals Freedom.
Mm,
And in that book, he talks about how he's a military guy. And he talked about how in the military, people would just come up to him and be like, we have this awful thing. Like, this isn't good, you know?
mhm,
And he would always say, good. And it got to a point where the people who were reporting to him, they stopped kind of panicking and just saying, like, I already know what you're going to say. You're going to say good. And so when they asked him, like, why do you always say good? He said, no matter what pain you go through, there is something to learn.
yeah.
And I think it's a powerful perspective, especially on stress.
Yeah, absolutely. There is always something to learn, and I just love that, like, in terms of being a leader,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that that goes so much into, like, the workplace and the way that your leader handles situations and the way that they react to things is gonna trickle down to how their employees react.
Yeah.
And so if they have confidence and they don't have worries and they're able to, help you through those hard times, like, you're going to take that on and you're going to have that perception through the things that you would normally be maybe really stressed about.
Yeah. I really think a lot about how you lead, like, right to your point, it does trickle down. If you're a leader who panics and is like, oh my God, we got to get this done, versus, being a servant leader and really seeing what your team and your people need to execute
Yeah.
and ensuring that you're serving them and getting them what they need to really be successful and to set them up for success. They're two totally different, ways of moving forward and
Yeah.
leading a team.
Yeah. And so it makes me ask this question, like, thinking of your lens of the things that you see in the world, like, what do you find stressful? You have these core, like, beliefs of this is stressful before you're even going into a situation, right? And that just trickles down in the way that you experience it, the way that you think about it and feel it, and the actions that you take after handling some sort of stressful situation. So, what kind of preconceived stress do you have in your mind that you're kind of already setting yourself up to go through something in a much more difficult way than maybe you have to?
Yeah. You ever see that post, easy to spot a yellow car when you're looking for a yellow car?
Yeah.
So, perspective here. If you're thinking your morning commute's always going to be stressful on your way to work,
Yeah.
it's going to be stressful versus seeing it as, okay, it's a little slower. I get a little more time to myself. It can be more quiet time in the car by myself,
Hmm.
a slower start to the day before I enter the chaos of the work world.
Yeah.
So it's about your perspective and what you already believe about things you're going to deal with that are going to cause stress.
Right. So it's really important to think about that. Like, what preconceived notions do you have about stress, about things that are going to be stressful? Because you're already starting that circumstance or situation just really not on a great note.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to manifestation. Like if you believe that, you're putting out that frequency, you're pulling that frequency toward you, that becomes the reality that you experience.
As well as your subconscious mind wanting to prove you right.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, this is stressful, this is stressful. So subconsciously, you're looking for ways to prove that right because you
Yep.
want to be right and you want to say, see, I knew it.
Like all your biological processes, everything that is kind of running behind the scenes without you knowing is moving to validate that belief.
Hmm. Yeah. And so that kind of brings me to discussing like your just what it feels like when you start to feel stress and what is actually happening. So we talked about the nervous system and that, you're triggering the automatic response of your sympathetic response, which is fight or flight. But what actually happens during that? So you may start to feel really anxious. You start to feel your muscles tense up.
Munsels, I like that.
Your breath might become shallow. You're breathing really fast. Your heart is increasing, your heart rate. Maybe you're shaking a little bit. You're starting to feel anxious. And the really important thing to note is that there's nothing wrong with you when these things are happening. Like your body is trying to communicate to you. This is your body's alarm system to say, "Hey, like pay attention, something is off."
Yeah. And it's kind of rewriting that script of understanding like what a symptom is, right? Whereas modern medicine, we would say, okay, there's a symptom, let's manage it. This is no, no, no. That symptom is communication from your body trying to tell you something.
Yeah. Well, even like thinking of like anxiety, right? Like you will feel anxiety because if you are starting to get stressed, I mean, the anxiety is like the increased heart rate, the shortness of breath, and maybe shaking. But those are, like you said, they're symptoms. They're not a diagnosis. The
Mm,
diagnosis, like, what is the root cause of why you're feeling that symptom?
yeah.
And that's because there's some dysregulation in your nervous system. Your nervous system feels like there's danger, there's a problem. And so it's creating all of these symptoms going on in your body because it doesn't know what else to do. It's trying to tell you, hey, I need you to tend to this.
Yeah.
What can you do to bring me back down to the parasympathetic state to know that I am safe again?
Right. Rather than, you know, I always think like the two common ways of treating that, right? I'm stressed, so I'm going to smoke cigarettes, drink
Mm,
energy drinks, drink alcohol, or I'm going to take medication, which is just going to depress the central nervous system, which, wreaks havoc on your memory and your metabolism. So it's it's really about you don't need all that. Like taking the simple pause, and we'll kind of talk about more like what you can do, but this is really again starting at that awareness component, starting to understand the role of your subconscious mind in stress. um
It's taking that pause when you're feeling these symptoms and these issues. And like you said, having the awareness and deciding to tend to your body and tend to your needs
yeah.
to help yourself rather than to shove it down and just try to throw a band aid over it or try to avoid it.
Well, I mean, that gets into like the chakras, right? You're trapping energy,
Yeah,
and that's where you have illness.
right.
So I think I've said this before, but like your nervous system, your digestive system, your um, circulatory, your heart, and these are all systems, but those are also the chakra centers. And the kind of component that's left out of modern medicine is those are balls of energy. So if
Yeah.
you look at like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, he talks about this, where yes, those are systems of the body, but they're literal, excuse me, literally energy centers. And so what happens is that gets into like Reiki and energy healing, where if you just keep shoving that down, not tending to it, you're likely to have deeper complications later on because you're trapping energy
Mhm.
in your body, in those systems.
Yeah. We're meant to feel it and release it.
Yeah.
The more we just shove more problems down and band aid it or avoid it, the more like you're going to be stuck in that chronic stress state, like we talked about last episode.
Yeah. So it's having that awareness, and when you do feel the stress come up, being able to say like, what is my body trying to tell me? How do
Mm,
I tend to this now? Do I need to do something, or do I need to just take a moment and feel this and let it go?
yeah. And so it's really the root cause, at the very root cause, it is your thoughts about the circumstance that you are going through that's creating those feelings of stress. So that goes back to, like we said, your lens, the perception that you're having about it, and thinking to yourself and figuring out what is in my control. Can I do something to better this circumstance? Can I handle it better? Can I take action in some way to make the circumstance better and lower my stress about it? And if you can't and it's completely out of your control, then your only control is the way you think about it
Yeah.
and the way that you tend to your needs and the way that you manage the situation and feel about the situation and really being aware of what you need.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have like coping mechanisms. They don't know what to do when they're stressed. They just kind of freak out.
Yeah. Yep. I've been there.
So have I. I mean, so has everyone.
Yeah. So take us through then, right? The role of our thought, but to really kind of illustrate this, we want to go through CTFAR again because I think that it's such a simple exercise, but it really kind of starts to illustrate the role of your thoughts.
Yeah. So we went through CTFAR, which is an acronym. So I will just go over quickly what those are again. And it really explains how we go from the circumstance that we're in to the feelings and the reactions and everything that actually happens from that.
Yeah.
So C stands for circumstance, which is neutral. That is just what is happening, plain as day, no like meaning attached behind it.
Can be argued in a court of law.
Right.
It's just the reality of what happened.
It's just the facts.
Yeah.
T is for thoughts. So we have a thought about the situation, and that's where that thought programming comes in. That's where your lens comes in. We choose the thoughts that we're having based on just our own memories and programming, and that's when I can have a totally different thought about a situation versus you.
And that's where the awareness comes in because this is really the step you got to catch it at.
Right. From your thought, you create your feelings. So F is feelings. So whatever thought you're having is creating the feelings of stress, the feelings of anxiety, the feelings of just knowing that something is off, something is wrong. So that comes from your thoughts. And then A is for action. So you tend to take action based on the thoughts and feelings that you're having. This is another important step. Like if you didn't catch the awareness before, you could still have thoughts and feelings that are negative, stressful, anxious, but where you're going to go take action,
Mm.
like that's another point where you have a choice to choose to react in a way that is going to be a positive way that you're, tending to your needs, you're helping yourself or reacting poorly. And then R is just result. It's the result of everything that happened. It's the result of the action that you took to, you know, go off of those thoughts and feelings that you had.
Mhm.
So uh, I just can share a quick example unless you want to share one.
I actually, yeah, I saw a post the other day that I think perfectly applies to this.
Okay.
So it was a guy driving in his car.
Mhm.
He was going to a friend's birthday party and he was super late. And he said, I'm so stressed out. But what was really interesting was the awareness piece there. So he actually caught himself saying, well, maybe I just don't go because I don't have a good excuse.
Mhm.
And so then he's going through all these hypotheticals and he realized, like,
So those are all the thoughts.
right, so those are all your thoughts. And the feeling was he was stressed because he started thinking, well, they're talking about me. They're talking trash about me, about how I'm late and whatever. And his action almost was that he didn't go.
Mhm.
And then he in the post was just kind of talking about this and said, I realized that I was running through these hypotheticals by myself in my car and nothing different had happened. I was still in the car on the way to that party.
Right.
And so he ended up catching himself in that awareness piece, right? With his thoughts. He caught the thoughts and really saw what was going on. And then he ended up deciding me thinking that people are talking about me, that's ego.
Yeah.
And so, and we have to get into ego at some point too,
Mm.
but um, he caught this, realized that that was ego, thinking people were so caught up on him being late rather than celebrating his friend's birthday.
Mhm.
So he went anyway. He was late. Nobody noticed that he was late. He said they did not give an F. And so I think that's a really good example of like, he could have just not gone. And the result would have been people probably would have said something if he didn't go
Right.
and he was planning to and he told them he was going. But he also said, even if people are talking about you, who cares? Like,
Right.
let it go. And, we have to get into a deeper discussion of ego and the role it plays in all this. But that's a really great example of, he was going to not go. He went through these intense hypotheticals, caught himself, went anyway, and everything ended up being fine.
Right.
So, do we want to just like break that one down?
Yeah, I mean, the circumstance was he was late to the party.
Yeah.
Like, you can't argue that.
Right.
And then the thoughts and then the thoughts started being that he was thinking everybody was gonna be talking about him, and he was worried about, how he was gonna be perceived.
He started feeling stressed.
Yeah, maybe guilty that he was gonna be late and anxious about how everybody was gonna perceive him when he did show up.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, he kinda recognized that and caught that, so the action he ended up taking, he was kind of at a crossroads, like, the action could have been, "I go to this party and I show up late. You can apologize, sorry I'm late." Like,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the friend is probably happier he was there and late than not showing up at all.
Yeah.
So maybe he was able to realize that part too. So the action that he did take instead was to just show up,
Yeah.
and it was fine.
And the result was
It
he
was
had a
fine.
good time. Everybody was fine. He didn't notice and he just had fun and was there for his friend.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. I saw that and I was like, this is perfect. um, so kind of take us through then, right? We've kind of broken down CTFAR, the role of our thoughts, right? And so much of our stress coming from our thoughts. And we did kind of touch on, there's external stimuli that do create that stress, but ultimately we have to focus on what we can manage and control, which is our thoughts.
Mhm.
Again, conducting your mind. Um, but take us through our perception. Like, what is that made of? What is that lens that we're all each individually, uniquely seeing through?
So it really is made up of your beliefs. So, like, your core beliefs about the way life works, the way the world works, the way friendships are, the way that relationships should be. A lot of it has to do with like should statements, like things that you think should be a certain way.
Mm,
So those are your beliefs about something.
what's the expression? Don't start shooting all over yourself.
Yeah.
Love it.
So your beliefs, which then goes to your memories, because memories can be reasons for certain triggers to trigger that feeling of stress. Um, Beliefs, your habits. So just the way that you are on a day to day basis, the way that you subconsciously run your life.
Yeah, something I want to mention there is, you've said this to me is thinking negatively is a habit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you can apply that to anything with stress. If you constantly have a habit of thinking your morning commute is going to be stressful, it's going to be stressful.
Yeah. I mean, habits of thinking worst case scenario,
Mm,
habits of just
that's what I grew
thinking,
up with.
yeah, habits of just thinking, yeah, thinking negatively and taking all of your actions based on that. It is a habit because it is wired in your brain to go that way.
Yeah.
And like that's a pathway in your brain. And so if you want to make a new habit, you have to work on that, actively work on that to create a new pathway, which gets into neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say there's, it's a law of neuroplasticity. I can't remember who founded it, but it was studied and basically the law is neurons that fire together wire together.
yeah,
And so what that means is if you are, I don't know, I keep going back to traffic, right?
it's
If
okay.
if you keep thinking that that morning commute is going to be stressful, you are firing those neurons together and you are actually wiring your brain and programming it to be in that state, to have those thoughts, to fire in response to that stimuli.
Yeah.
So when you think about driving to work, those neurons have now wired together and they're going to start firing. It's going to be stressful.
Right. And it could even like not even be a terrible day of traffic, but your brain is thinking traffic, thinking stress. It's going to find something. It could be like one person like cuts you off and it's like, "Oh no, everything's terrible. I knew that was going to happen. I knew there was going to be stress." And you're just looking for that and focusing to find that. Um just because we mentioned neuroplasticity, I just kind of want to mention because was saying pathways. So think about like you're on a hike in the woods and you're on a path. Like it's very clearly um, cut out and made for you to walk on this path. It has all of the trees out of the way and you know exactly where you're going. Those are the pathways in your, like, think of that as the pathway in your brain that are created when you're younger. These are just the norm for you. This is how you know life.
Yeah.
And so if you want to create a new path, you can. You can go off path and create a new one, but it's going to take time before that path becomes an easier path to go on where you do clear out all the trees and you can see everything ahead.
Yeah.
But in order to do that, it's going to take going through that over and over and over before the new pathway is actually created. So
Right.
just relating that to the pathways in your brain that you create and the habits that you create.
Yeah. I like that way of putting it. It's called Hebb's rule.
Sure.
He basically studied neural networks. And so to your point, the way that you rewire your brain, the way that you create a new identity, it's literally by stopping those old habits, those old um, ways of thinking. Because I'm going back to traffic, but if you keep thinking that morning commute is going to be stressful and you don't catch that, you're going to continue to fire those neurons.
Right.
And so the only way not to is to pause and be able to say, no, I'm not going to choose that stress today. And starting a habit that goes the other way
Mhm.
of, no, I enjoy my morning commute, or it's neutral, you know, but getting away from firing those neurons because of the belief that you have. I don't know if they're neurons. I keep saying that, but
I'm pretty sure it
I
is.
think it is. Neural networks. Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds right. It's all right. Better than frisky from the last episode. Brisk. Nippy was the word I was looking for. Nippy. I mixed nippy and brisk and got to frisky.
Oh, you're funny.
Anyways, so again, it's trying to not fire those same neural networks together. If there's a habit you have that you want to rewire, you possess the ability to do it, but it doesn't happen right away. You have to also understand your current programming is what you're going to be working against. And you have to really define what you're actually working toward
Yeah.
because you're going to have to consciously choose it.
Yeah. And just going back to my example of like in the woods making a trail, like you're out there with a shovel. Like I'm just visualizing myself out there in the woods and I'm on a path and it's already cut out and I'm shoveling my way through a new path. It's going to take time. It's going to take multiple days. You can't
Right.
do it all in one day to create a new path.
The
But
other path is there,
it's
and you
there.
got to work on the other one.
Yeah, it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be uncomfortable. Then it would definitely be easier to just stay on the path that's already made.
You're going to look at the other path and think, man, it'd be really easy to just go back to that. And
Yeah.
that's comfort zone.
Mhm.
You don't create from there.
Right.
So it's all about the life you want to live. You want to sit still. You want to keep doing the same thing you're doing. Have at it. But it's hard work.
Yeah.
To create those new neural networks, to create new habits, to design your identity.
Mhm. And so just bringing that back to stress, like your perception is what creates stress. And like you said, there are external stimuli. There are things happening in your job, in society that you don't have control over. That's kind of the number one thing to recognize is that you don't have control over necessarily the situations that are happening, but you have control over the way you respond. That's not to say you're never going to feel stress, but you can feel that stress and then take a better action to actually better yourself rather than shove it down and just be chronically stressed and never let it go.
Yeah, I want to clarify too. Like, we're not saying like delusionally run from it
Yeah.
or um, act like it's not there. Like you're meant to feel the feelings you feel,
Hmm.
but you're also meant, much like meditation, to release it and let it go.
Yeah.
Be the observer of your thoughts and
Hmm.
the observer of your feelings. There's in like there was a higher consciousness teaching, like a mystery school thing. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they made the point that like your negative feelings are what makes you human. It
Right.
it heightens the human experience because when you feel positive feelings, you have that reference point.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as like you can't enjoy the happiness without understanding the darkness,
Right.
you know? Um and another thing I wanted to say too is when we have spoken on stress, we always say this, and I think it very succinctly explains the entire thing. Having a good day is a choice.
Hmm.
You don't just wake up and make it happen. Like you consciously choose that.
You're being intentional with your thoughts with that. And that's, again, not to say that there won't be things that happen that might create stress, but you're not letting that overtake your entire day
Right.
and allowing that to just take over your whole mindset for everything. And, the other thing on that is like, I know a lot of people are super stressed at work. I was one of those people. And there also comes a point where if it's very much out of your control and you have so much external stimuli of stress, we've said this before, like what is in your control is looking for a new job, looking for a new circumstance and situation to put yourself in if you cannot manage and handle that.
Yeah. I'm always so, I don't know how to word this. I think people sit in jobs that they don't like because they like some of the people.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that tends to put people in not so great situations because their livelihood is affected.
Right.
And I don't think you will ever really see how much it's impacting you until you leave that job.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I loved the people I worked with. I
yeah,
really did. And I still do. And I'm connected to them on social media and that's great. But at the end of the day, like I don't keep in touch with 99% of them.
hmm,
They weren't actually like my close friends that were going to be in my life forever for every milestone and things I'm going to share, everything with. Like they were my work friends and that's great to get along with them at work, but
yeah,
you're not going to call them up when you have a great news or bad news or
right. And maybe this is a little harsh, but I tend to be more direct. Misery loves company.
That's true.
Like we had so many situations where you had work friends who were just people you drank with because you were all miserable at work.
Mhm.
And you would go to the office and it was just kind of like stressful all day until you eventually got to the bar at night.
Right.
I mean, we had those jobs where you were drinking 3, 4 times a week with your coworkers after work.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
And that just makes it seem like it's so fun
yeah.
because you have that little piece of it, but that's not really building a foundational friendship
Mm,
and relationship that you're going to have for the rest of your life. And so, yeah, if you leave a job, you will see the people that you really stay connected with.
fun fact. Um, so I saw something about they were talking about like the neuroscience of alcohol,
Mm.
very similar to cocaine. So
Oh,
what
yeah.
actually happens is you get a dopamine spike from your first drink
Yeah.
and then you plummet past baseline. Every drink after, you're trying to chase that and you're just going lower and lower and lower.
Yep.
I am so grateful we don't drink anymore.
Me too.
I, I,
I feel so much better.
yeah. Anyways, So I want to kind of circle this back then to fear, because fear is a very real component of stress, whether it's, an actual fear of danger or a fear of judgment or something else.
Or a fear of making a change in your life that is going to be uncomfortable, such as leaving your job.
Yeah. You know, I also wanted to say fixed mindset versus growth mindset. Fixed mindset is I'm here. This is my job. These are my coworkers. And this sucks, but that's fine. Um, this is what I got. And you don't create new habits. You don't do new things. Growth mindset is I can do this. I can build new things. I can design a new life. I can design a new identity. I can get a new job.
Mhm.
Um,
And there's also a big perception I've heard from people like, oh, there's no other jobs out there.
that one drives me nuts
Yeah.
because here's the thing. Yes, I am an entrepreneur. I have never worked full time for anyone, um, at times to my own detriment. But the issue with that statement is that there has never, ever been more opportunity in the world to make money doing anything you want.
Very true.
And my other gripe with that is that it primarily comes from the news
Yeah.
because they programmed everybody that there was a massive labor shortage.
Right.
I, you know, sure, there's companies not willing to pay. Sure, there's people not willing to take the jobs, but that doesn't mean there's no opportunity.
Yeah.
This idea that there aren't opportunities for me is this like woe is me victim mindset of I can't find anything. I will never do anything else.
Mhm.
You got a comment on a post that was like, my depression stops me from working with a life coach.
Yeah.
That is just bullshit.
I don't know where you come up with that just definitive statement. I don't know who told you that. I don't know if that's something you think of. I was depressed when I went and worked with a life coach. So, from personal experience, I can say that is not accurate. But
No,
I
but
mean, that's what we get from people, from society. And those are, again, those external things that are just making you think a certain way and your perception and lens of everything.
it it really kind of goes back to like, this is crass, but I always talk about it like this pissing contest of mental health of like my trauma's worse. I
Yeah.
can't do this because I have it so bad. And now we're diagnosing people with complex PTSD.
It's all complex.
It's all
It
complex.
is.
Everybody has trauma. Like,
Hmm.
let's be real.
Hmm.
It's all just like it doesn't make sense anymore. Like people really need to take a step back and be like, is any of this actually getting anyone anywhere?
Yeah.
I digress.
If you what was that quote from Big Magic? An amazing book.
If you
If you
fight
fight
for your limitations, you get to keep them.
yeah, why would you wanna fight for limitations?
It was a story about, hopefully I don't butcher this. I believe it was something that she didn't want to talk on the phone, and her mom like made her
Mhm.
and said, like, you're an adult, you're going to do this. And they went back and forth, and she kind of tried to stick up for herself.
Yeah, like, I
And
can't do that.
I can't do that. And her mom kind of said to her, if you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that's something people need to hear because you are often, it's not other people keeping you in a box. It's your programming. And sure, in some like compounding way from the past, it might be other people, but it's what you do in this present moment that changes the course of your life.
Right. And that's choosing your beliefs instead of just keeping the ones that were given to you and only seeing the world through that lens of stress and negativity and never taking a step back to say, no, I don't want to choose those beliefs. I am now an adult. I am my own human being and I choose differently.
Yeah. And it also ties back to, again, your beliefs, right? If I think I have depression and a life coach can't help me, any responsible life coach is going to tell you, no, I'm not going to work with you.
Right.
because they know your belief is going to prevent you from getting any value out of that relationship.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I want to tie this back into fear, right? So, there's fear involved in stress, but the other kind of big component there is actually making decisions out of fear.
Right.
And that really is that scarcity mindset, that lack mindset with money is a lot of times how it comes up. But fear in the decision making process, in the manifestation process, will cause problems. Um, and I also think about, um, like when you're making decisions out of fear, that's generally keeping you fixed.
Yeah.
That's in a fixed mindset. That is generally going to mean, classic example, I can't get a new job because I can't risk not providing for my family. It's not like new jobs don't pay you. Like you're going to get a paycheck,
Yeah.
but it's so much like I see people like unhappy with their job, but not willing to commit any amount of time when they are not working at their job to creating better circumstances.
Mhm.
Joe Rogan talks about this, and I'm not a big fan of Joe Rogan, but something he says, there's a very popular clip from him where he says, he kind of talks about like the matrix, right? And like being in the rat race, working 9 to 5, um, just being stuck in it. And like so many people are scraping by, right? And he says, the only way out is to literally allocate your remaining hours to work on something, to learn a new skill, to create better. And you need to save and buy yourself 6 months and go. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
And like, there's so much fear involved that people stay paralyzed, just not willing to take action, not willing to work on anything else, not willing to believe that they could be that person. So I think, again, like take inventory on the fear in your life, because if you really deeply assess your life and your ways of thinking and your thought programming, like you're gonna see there's areas where it's preventing you from actually doing anything.
Yeah. What fears do you have and what actions are you taking because of that? Or
Yeah.
not taking because of that?
Yeah. So let's get into then how we actually manage stress. I think that'll be kind of a larger episode, but let's kind of start that discussion today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've really been talking about it a little bit throughout this, right? But
Yeah.
it's the acceptance and the awareness of what is actually happening. Your body is communicating to you. Your body is so smart. Your body knows when something is off and it wants to tell you that and it wants you to decide for yourself what it is you need. And so there's a lot you could do to manage stress, whether that is your daily habits that, you know, keep you in a place of being less stressed, or habits that are super stressful, rolling out of bed and giving yourself 5 minutes to get to work. You're starting the day like stressed
Mm.
versus other habits and starting your day slow. And
Can I speak to that one? Because man, I got some experience there.
yeah, so
I I used to wake up and just be so bothered that I had another day.
hmm
And it was dreadful. Every morning, I was just in an awful mood. Everything drove me nuts. And I wouldn't even catch myself doing it until later in the day.
hmm
And the big pivotal shift was you saw something that was, they said, when you get out of bed in the morning, when your feet hit the floor,
mm,
your first foot, you say thank. The second foot, you say you. Thank you for another day.
yeah,
That completely changed my life. It really did.
yeah. um so going back, what was I saying? So
Sorry.
just your awareness of, the habits that you have, and the awareness of when your body is trying to communicate something to you, what can you do? So you can work on your habits, or you can do something in that moment that you're feeling stress. And we'll have to have a whole episode about the things you can do, the tools and resources, because that's a lot, but it really is individual.
Mm,
Like something that might work for me doesn't work for you. And it takes time and effort to decide what makes you feel better,
yeah.
what brings you back down, and your body will tell you that you're feeling better again. You'll be able
Mhm.
to feel more relaxed. You'll have a big sigh. And when you have like a big sigh, like that's like your nervous system starting to reset.
Yeah, and we'll kinda get into, the vagus nerve and, something I wanted to mention, we'll do a deeper episode. We're kinda, like, breaking down our speech on all of stress right now, but, I think the final part of this is stress management for the mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
But what I wanna mention is if you are someone who sees yourself as, very busy in your mind, it's very common. Really, that's everyone. Um, but if you're struggling with the awareness piece and being able to slow down, being able to say, okay, I'm stressed right now, or what thoughts am I having that are leading me to feel this way? A lot of that is addressed with meditation.
Hmm.
And again, that's really being able to observe your thoughts. But when you consistently meditate and you consistently have that practice, it allows you to be much more comfortable in your self talk and slow down enough to actually be aware of and see your self talk, being aware of what it is, what it looks like. And that is just an invaluable skill. I mean, in anything you do, whether you're trying to create something new in your life, you're trying to create new habits, you're trying to find a new job, you're taking a leap of faith, whatever it is, meditation will help you really conduct your mind in a much more efficient way with less stress and less fear. It'll frankly just make life more enjoyable.
Yeah. Um, I think, that kind of gets into everything that's, the some coping mechanisms. We're going to have a whole episode on that. And releasing judgments of yourself, is kind of the last point I want to make, because we judge ourselves and we shame ourselves so hard for the thoughts and feelings we have. And that just keeps you stuck,
Yeah.
because you're not even giving yourself a chance or an opportunity to do better, because you're just so harsh on yourself for what you're doing. And that doesn't allow you to grow either.
Yeah. I mean, it's again like conduct your mind as if you are speaking to your best friend, not someone that you're trying to bully.
Yeah.
I think that's a big shift in mindset, and
Hmm.
that one helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it, and more to come on stress.
Yeah, for sure. Friendly reminder: this podcast is sponsored by New Moon Apparel. That is our Zen motivation and moon themed clothing line. You can shop designs at newmoonapparel.com. We would so deeply appreciate a review on our podcast, wherever you're listening to it. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, it all helps. And if you do get value from this, we would deeply appreciate a share. A lot of people have asked how they can help. Sharing with your network is a big help for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.